So welcome everyone to the series Speaking Up for Point Molate, in which invited speakers can address key questions and the public can ask questions. We'd like to begin the program by recognizing that we're gathered on unceded Ohlone land. For thousands of years, the �W𝐚𝐫𝐤 people have lived on this land that's now known as the East Bay, including Point Molate. In their own words, they did not own the land, but they belonged to it. We recognize the importance of this land to the Ohlone people, past, present, and future, and invite you to join with us in learning about and honoring the �W𝐚𝐫𝐤 history and work today. Our speakers present for approximately 30 to 40 minutes, then we'll open it up to Q&A. Please limit your questions to 1 minute. We invite sincere questions asked with courtesy and respect. Inappropriate behavior will cause removal from the meeting. And please use the chat to let us know how we can improve, or to leave your email if you'd like us to send you announcements directly for future meetings. I'll put the webpage for this speaker series in the chat, and this session and future sessions will be recorded, and they're posted to our YouTube channel, Speaking Up for Point Molate. Next week is Labor Day, so we do not have a speaker next week. The following week on September 12th, Andre Soto will speak about the history of the struggle to save Point Molate. I'm Pam Stello. I'm a co-chair of the Point Molate Alliance and the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and I serve on the Board of Citizens for East Shore Parks. I live in Richmond, and I'm a co-founder and co-host of this series with Sally Tobin. Sally is a biologist and retiree from the Stanford Center for Biomedical Ethics. She works with the Point Molate Alliance and the Richmond Shoreline Alliance, and is a member of the Bay Area Sea Kayakers. She serves on the Board of Citizens for East Shore Parks, and she lives in Richmond. Sally, can you wave? Mm-hmm. Our Zoom administrator is Danny Zaki. Danny's the Bay and Shoreline organizer for the San Francisco Bay chapter of the Sierra Club. Please wave, Danny. This week, we're very pleased to have Mark Palmer with us. The title of his presentation is The Last Whaling Station in the US. And I actually have a short bio from Mark that I will read to you, and then we'll have a short video. I don't know why I'm sorry, I apologize.
Just tell them I save whales, that's probably enough.
Well, that, exactly. Yeah, so, sorry. So yes, while an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, Mark Palmer began his life's work by founding and leading the Endangered Species Committee of California. From there, he served as the regional vice president for the Sierra Club of Northern California and Nevada, and he played a key role in blocking all oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. He's written widely on conservation issues and has over 50 years of experience lobbying in the California legislature and in Congress on wildlife and wilderness issues. Throughout his professional career, his major interest has been the welfare and conservation of marine mammals. We're very pleased to have him with us, and he's asked us first to show a short video, which is a 𝐾𝐬𝐬 video about the last whaling station. Danny?
I think it's probably safe to say that the general public has not been aware, and was not aware certainly in the late 60s and early 70s, that there was a whaling station out at Point Richmond that was killing whales offshore. It just wasn't part of the information that was available to the public at the time.
I am Pratt Peterson. I worked as a whaler for 12 years at Point San Pablo. I happen to be pretty good as a gunner. I had 20-some straight kill shots. To some people, it's pretty bad, but to me at the time, it was pretty good.
The purpose of whaling from this whaling station was largely to be rendered for the products that included meat that went into dog food. Most of it went into cow-canned dog food.
It was exciting. You're up there, you are the gunner. You could be a hero 1 minute and a bum the next minute. Because if I didn't get the well, they didn't get paid. It was all up to me.
Starting in 1970, there was a sudden change in public attitude towards these animals. Of course, we had dolphins and other animals in captivity starting in the late 1950s for the first time, and saw how intelligent these animals were. And then all of a sudden, we realized that we were destroying this ocean intelligence.
After I'd shot the whale, I felt really, what would you say, a sense of relief, I guess. I didn't have any guilty feeling about it, you know, just come later on.
It was Nixon's Interior Secretary, Walter Hickel. He was actually fired by President Nixon, but as he left in the last days, he put a number of the great whale species on the endangered species list.
Oh, sometimes the part of it, the killing part of it is, you know, I had a lot of respect for them. They're a magnificent animal.
The numbers that were being killed by this station and other whaling stations around the world was fairly trivial compared to the ones taken by the Soviet Union and Japan at that time. In the big factory ships, they were killing thousands of whales and decimating whole populations. But even this little whaling station here, killing a few animals every year, decimated the humpback whale populations off the coast here and probably hurt the sperm whale populations off the coast here.
I was fired like a lot of other people, you know, out of a job. But I was lucky. I just walked up the street and went to work for another company.
I think it's very important that the people of the Bay Area know the history of this whaling station, because we can now say never again. We in fact have a long history of whaling, and it's important that we take that on and that we recognize that, and that we be humble in our request to Japan and to Norway and these other countries that they should stop whaling as we did. And yes, it's going to hurt, and yes, you're going to lose a few jobs, but we did it in the United States, and we can handle it, and you can handle it too. And a lot of countries followed. South Africa, Australia, the United Kingdom all stopped their whaling operations shortly after the United States did.
It was something I was doing to make a living, put food on the table, you know. When they did come in and end it, I was glad they did. If it would have come up again, if I was a younger man and could do it and know what I know now, I wouldn't do it.
Good news is that the humpback whales are coming back off the coast of California. You can go out and see them now, and they're more valuable alive than they were dead.
Mark, I'll turn it over to you now.
That sounds great. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for coming to this talk. I appreciate it and was pleased to be invited to talk here. I'm the Associate Director of the International Marine Mammal Project of Earth Island Institute, which is based in Berkeley, California. Earth Island Institute was the last organization that David Brower founded. Dave was, as you know, the first executive director of the Sierra Club. He went on to found Friends of the Earth and the League of Conservation Voters. And one of the last organizations he founded was Earth Island Institute, with the idea that you would have an organization set up to accept people who had interesting projects to work on the environment, and try to reduce the amount of bureaucracy those people have to go through in order to come up with the funding and other sorts of things that they need in order to run an organization. In other words, the umbrella group Earth Island Institute provides support with the Internal Revenue Service, with a board of directors, with bookkeeping, with various other services for the projects. There's more than 80 projects now at Earth Island Institute, and the International Marine Mammal Project is just one of them, although we are one of the oldest, having been with Earth Island since 1982 founding and continuing to work on a variety of issues. Now we're still one of the biggest of the projects as well. We are the organization that established the Dolphin Safe label for tuna and continue to work to stop the killing of dolphins in the tuna fishery and other sorts of fisheries. We also were the group that took 𝐾𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿, the orca star of the hit movie Free Willy, bringing him from his home in Mexico City, where the film was filmed, Free Willy, and then up to Oregon Coast Aquarium, where he was rehabilitated and eventually released back into his waters in Iceland. The only orca so far, the captive orca, that's ever been released back into the ocean. I'm also working on such things as, you can see my t-shirt here, Save Japan Dolphins. We're the group that was involved with the 𝐀𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐿 documentary. If you saw that, received the Academy Award for Best Documentary, with Rick O'Barry and Earth Island working to expose the killing of dolphins in Japan. The International Marine Mammal Project has been doing a lot of things, but let's switch gears right now to talk about the last whaling station. And you've seen the great piece that KQAD did back in the day. I'm not even sure when they filmed that at this stage, but in any event, it's been a few years. And I'm going to now share my screen and talk a little bit about the station and some of the species of whales that were involved in it. So let's see. How's that? Can everybody see it?
Mm-hmm.
Last whaling station. And this is the last whaling station. Maybe I can move this over a little bit here. Let me see. Oops, that wasn't supposed to happen. Come on. This is the whaling station here, if you can see by my little arrow. And unfortunately, there's little people here, but there's a ramp shooting down into the water. This is called a slipway. The slipway was the way that they brought the whales up into the factory. And then, as you can see, this long building, they would have been rendered in here for various meat products, mostly dog food. This was really a rendering plant. They did a lot of work, with horses and other sort of things being rendered here, dead livestock, as well as the whaling operation. And if you see this operation over here, this is a completely different factory situation over on this side. And the evocative pillars that you saw, the piers, are actually from that operation. It's not from the whaling station. The whaling station burned down and is on a plot right next to there. And there's absolutely nothing on that plot right now. It's just a field. There's a few pieces of concrete next to the waterfront, but that's about it. Part of the foundation probably of the boat. So we were a little bit, some effective license was taken, I think, in showing the piers there behind us as if they had burned down. The station did burn down. For many years, some of the groups I worked with, such as the Whale Center in Oakland, which was run by Maxine McCloskey, the wife of Executive Director Mike McCloskey of the Sierra Club. Some of you might know Mike and Maxine. They're both gone now, I'm afraid. Actually, I think Mike is still alive, but he's retired, of course. We had hoped to make a museum of this whaling station because the Pacific Coast does have a vast whaling history, and there's a lot of things that went on here with regard to whaling, but the foundations of some of San Francisco's major buildings were on top of whaling ships that were abandoned during the gold rush. The whaling ships would come into San Francisco and all the crew would run off to dig for gold and leave the ships abandoned in San Francisco harbor. this whaling station would have been great, but again, it burnt down. And I'm not saying whether or not it was under funny circumstances, but I suspect. This is the Slipway, and it shows here the whole operation, if you will. This is a catcher boat here, and would have had the harpoon gun on the top, and you can see a coil rope here that would be attached to the harpoon. They'd shoot these things in. These have a bomb inside them when they shoot them in, and the bomb is supposed to explode and kill the whale. It doesn't always have that effect, unfortunately, and it can take a while for these whales to die. It's still the method that's being used today. In the case of these small boats, they would drag the whales into San Francisco Bay to the shore station in Richmond. And there are similar stations up and down the coast of California. The Richmond one happened to be the longest lived. I'm also a little curious about what kind of whale this is. I'm not quite sure I can figure it out. It looks to be like it might almost be a Pacific right whale, but the right whales were protected at that time, so I don't think it's a right whale. But it's got these stubby fins and doesn't look like a humpback, although it is rather fat. So I'm not quite sure of the species here that's being depicted of whale. But a lot of them were killed by the hunters in those days. This is to emphasize something I mentioned in the video, that the humpback whales were pretty much decimated by the stations. There were actually 3 whaling stations throughout this period from 1956 to 1965. One of them was in Monterey. The other 2 were based in Richmond. The Monterey and the other Richmond one went out of business, but this last Richmond whaling station continued to fish for whales. It was called the Del Monte Fish Company. But here you can see in 1956, they had 133 humpback whales and then 199 humpback whales. Then it starts to fall as the whales are depleted off the shore. 67, 62, 39, 55 in 1963, but then down to 64 with 27. In 1965, only 4 were caught. It may well be that 65 was the year that the protections went into effect, international protections through the International Whaling Commission for humpback whales. So that may be artificially low, but still you can see the humpback whales essentially disappeared from our coast along the California coast. And we saw a similar depletion of blue whales and others. The good news is that they're starting to come back. And in many cases are quite robust out there. And you can go out every day right now out of Monterey Bay, out of San Francisco Bay on a whale watching trip. And you can see humpback whales and blue whales and some of the other species that are out there that are doing better. I like this photo. You remember Pratt Peterson, the gunner from the whaling station who was interviewed. The woman next to him is Julie. Julie was a graduate student at UC Berkeley. She did for her master's thesis, I think actually for a PhD thesis, the history of fishing, the commercial fishing industry in the Richmond area. And this was an oral history that she did through UC Bancroft Library. And it's something, if you don't have a copy of, you might want to check it out and get a copy for your historical reasons of looking at the whole fishing industry of Richmond. It should be very rich. But as part of her program in talking with us at the Whale Center, she interviewed Pratt Peterson, the gunner for the whaling vessels and about the whaling history there in Richmond. So we invited Pratt out on one of our whale watching vessels for the Whale Center. And this is in the mid 1980s, 86, I think, or 87. And he and Julie had a great time, especially Pratt. I think he got a big kick out of how excited people were to see these whales that he used to go out and hunt. Julie got terribly seasick, and I don't think will ever go out with us ever again, unfortunately, on a whale watching trip. That happens when you go out. Do take your seasick medication. Let's talk a little bit about some of the species. This is the humpback whale, which we talked a lot about in the film, and I gave you the numbers. A beautiful animal. The females get up to 60 feet long. Unfortunately, they have a lot of oil, which is why they were targeted by whalers. And indeed, the oil is used for a variety of purposes, for margarine and other sorts of things. that can be consumed using whale oil. They're a very acrobatic whale. They jump out of the water on a fairly regular basis. And again, you can see this off our coast here, San Francisco or Monterey Bay, just about any day. Beautiful animal. They're usually here from, they've been coming in earlier in recent years in February and March, and all the way through to October, November, when the rains come back, and then they head south for the winter months to warmer climes. This is a blue whale, the largest animal on Earth. In the North Pacific, they get about 80 feet long. In the Southern Oceans in Antarctica, there's reports of ones more than 100 feet long, at least during the whaling days. They're probably a little bit skimpier now, but they are showing signs slowly of coming back. We see them a lot off the coast here of California, again during the months of summer and the fall, when we have a lot of krill in the water and a lot of little animalcules for them to eat. The sperm whale was also targeted. We don't see many sperm whales on our whale watch trips because they're further offshore. So the whalers, in order to catch them, really had to go quite far and probably spend the night or two out on the ocean in order to find these things. I like this shot because it shows a little diver here swimming along with the sperm whale. They can grow to the males are quite large, up to 60 feet long. They are a toothed whale. Most of the great whales, the large whales like the sperm whale, like the blue whale and the humpback whale, are baleen whales. They have baleen plates and filter out small animals. The sperm whale, by contrast, has this long jaw here with lots of teeth in it. Then they feed mainly on squid, which is why they're out at such far out on the ocean, because they like the deep ocean for where the squid hang out. And finally, the gray whale, the California gray whale, which comes along our coast. Now, the gray whales were protected internationally back in the 1930s, actually, with the League of Nations. That fell apart, and of course we had World War II, but afterwards the International Whaling Commission came along and they protected right whales and the California gray whale from hunting at that time. However, the Del Monte Fish Company in Richmond did go out and kill gray whales. They had a special scientific permit by the Bureau of Sports, Fisheries, and Wildlife, which at that time was the predecessor to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And they caught about 160, 170 gray whales for this scientific research that they were doing to determine the population parameters of gray whales, basically preliminary to opening up the gray whale population to hunting. My friend and mentor, Jim Schroeder, actually put that to rest in 1968. He contacted Senator Alan Cranston's office, and Alan Cranston's office had the permit pulled, and the gray whales have not been killed officially since then. They are killed in the North Pacific by Russian whalers for their local native peoples on the Chakotay Peninsula and other places in Siberia near the coast. There's also most of the gray whales, they kill about 120 of the gray whales a year for that purpose. It's something that I think could be phased out, but it's a tough one to get, especially these days with the Soviet Union. So I'm going to end there, I think, and let me stop my sharing.
Great, thank you very much. That was very informative. Sally will lead the Q&A. Sally?
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so if you would like to ask a question, please raise your electronic hand, which is under reactions. I don't see anybody on a phone, so we won't worry about that part of it. But if people will raise their hands, that will be great. Aha, Chip Gribble. Go ahead, Chip.
Hey, thank you very much for the work you've done and the work you're doing. fantastic. My question is about the property for that whaling station and that part of the Richmond coast shoreline. Do you know what is to become of that property, or what are the plans? Or maybe somebody from Point Molate Alliance has some idea about that?
Yeah, I don't know. One thing I think would be useful actually is to do an archaeological survey and perhaps dig at the place. I'm sure there's some relics from the burning of the whaling station that might be of interest to historians. But as to its status, I'm not sure whether it's public or private land at this stage.
I can jump in. That's public land. It's called Terminal 4, and it is zoned for parks and recreation.
Great. Be nice to have a little monument there. Unfortunately, we can't have our museum, but we can have a little monument.
Sally?
Thank you. Michael Helm?
I think he put his question in the chat.
Oh.
How far back does whaling go in Richmond? His mic is not currently working.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I don't think it goes back very far. Again, the statistics you saw from 1956 are some of the earliest I've been able to find for the Richmond whaling station, and again, those statistics included a second station plus the Monterey whaling station. Monterey has had a whaling station for many, many years, going back, and in fact, you can see their whaling station is still intact in the area with a bit of a tower where people could spot whales coming into Monterey Bay. And that, I think, is a turn of the century or a little bit earlier, back in the 1880s, perhaps. So whaling started fairly early in California as these Yankee whalers from the New England seaports. They basically ran all over the Atlantic Ocean and depleted the various populations of sperm whales there. So they came into the Pacific Ocean looking for other whales, and eventually focused on the sperm whale as well as gray whales. And it's the more modern era from basically World War I up until the 1970s that the big decimation of whales was caused by the modern whaling, where they improved the ships that could catch up with the faster swimming whales. They had methods to harpoon them with the harpoon gun, which helped a lot, rather than hand-thrown harpoons from a small boat. So there is a very long history in the Pacific of these types of whaling, going back to the 1850s and 60s. But as far as shore whaling in Richmond, I don't think it goes back that far. I think it just was set up in the 1950s to take advantage of whales that were offshore that seemed to be on the increase after the decline of international whaling off the coast.
Thank you. Kelly Hammergren?
Just a couple of comments. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. And you mentioned a couple of organizations, and I was wondering if you wanted to say which one would be the best if we wanted to give donations to protect the whales and marine life. And then I wanted to ask, because Berkeley is charging forward on getting ferry service across the bay. And they're talking about maybe this will be, Berkeley would be a station for an electric ferry rather than a diesel ferry. And those move a little slower, and I thought they, you know, possibly they're going to be quieter. And do you think that makes any difference on the marine life, or are all these ferries just bad for the marine life? That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciated your presentation.
Well, to talk a little bit about the ferries, the problem with ferries is they're very carbon developed in terms of the amount of pollution they spill out, and that's carbon dioxide as well as the other noxious things that come from the burning of diesel fuel. So, and they're not very efficient. It does relieve a bit some of the congestion on the bay bridges and things like that, but not very much, and at a very high energy cost, much more higher than having a lot of cars driving around, frankly. They're not as efficient as rail or some of the other alternatives that you could use to go back and forth across the bay. So that is a problem. And there has been some experimentation actually with solar ferries and electric ferries, which may be the future for those kinds of things. They are very pleasant, of course, for those who ride on them across the bay. As to organizations, you're certainly welcome to give funds to the International Marine Mammal Project. I'll put up our website so people can go and check out some of the things we're doing on our website directly in the chat box. But definitely there are funds there. There's a large number of organizations that work to protect whales and dolphins, and a lot of them have their own kind of niche. The American Cetacean Society, for example, is very heavy on education, and but they also engage in some advocacy for the protection of whales. And they're very good for small children, especially if you have a child at home that you'd like to educate. The American Cetacean Society is a good one. Their main headquarters are in Los Angeles, but they do have a branch here that's very active in the San Francisco Bay Area. Other groups like the Animal Welfare Institute in Washington, D.C., Humane Society of the United States, the International Fund for Animal Welfare, which is based in Massachusetts. All of these groups are working on it, and more broadly, World Wildlife Fund nationwide or worldwide, and some of the other groups that are out there. Natural Resources Defense Council is active. So there's a variety of groups that are working on various aspects of the whaling issue and protecting whales and dolphins. But each of us has our own sort of thing that we focus on.
Thank you. Jeannie Kortz?
Yes, hi, thank you, Mark. That was a really informative, well, it's a presentation, thank you. I'm just curious, did they go outside the bay to hunt whales? Do you know? Because I've been out to the Farallones, I've seen humpback whales, blue whales, fin whales. Did they hunt humpbacks out past the Golden Gate? Do you know?
The answer is yes. All their whales, pretty much, they went outside the Golden Gate. Now that there isn't whale hunting going on, we are seeing some of these animals, gray whales in particular, and even humpback whales coming into San Francisco Bay. They're probably following the fish. In the case of the humpback whales, gray whales are very used to swimming in and out of bays, and there's a possibility they might have bred in San Francisco Bay. Nowadays, they go all the way down to Baja, to the Baja protected lagoons, to give birth to their young and to breed, and then head back up in the summer to the Arctic Ocean, where they feed during the summer months. But yes, all the whales in those days would not come into the Bay Area. The boats had to go out through the Golden Gate and all the way out towards the Farallones and beyond the Farallon Islands in order to find the whales that they killed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Baer?
Oh, hi. This is just, fantasizing. but because you were, I could tell by your voice, you're longing to set up a museum, and I'm sure you've thought about it already. So, you know, when we were thinking of what we could do at Point Molate, if we were able to make it a park, you know, one of the things we wanted to do was make a marine center, a marine, you know, learning center. And it would be really fun to create a space for you to put the whaling museum there. So I just want to throw that out.
Thank you, Debbie. David Helvar?
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Mark. Since it's just over 50 years since California stopped intentionally killing whales, but maybe you could talk a little about ship strikes and entanglements and fishing gear, and kind of the scale of that problem, how it impacts our whale populations today.
Right. Just because we've stopped the killing of whales off the shore of California, there are still some countries killing whales, by the way, for meat, but the whaling industry is dying by little bits and pieces. The people who continue to whale are clasping onto it with their fingernails, hoping to continue it, but they're not doing too well. In Japan, the whaling has been subsidized for years by the federal government, but the current conservative government has told the industry that they want to stop the subsidies, and there's a general feeling that the industry will not be able to survive without the government subsidies. In Iceland, we've seen one of the major companies that used to kill minke whales has dropped out completely. They threw in the towel and said they're no longer going to go whaling. We do have one last whaling station there that's killing fin whales, which are an endangered species. I think they've got about 76 so far this year. But we're hoping that the government will phase out the whaling in 2024. The Minister of Fisheries has indicated that she's in favor of that. And in Norway, we had one of the companies that had been fishing for several generations, or whaling for several generations, has stopped whaling. There's still several other companies that are whaling in Norway, but those are the major groups. Other countries don't allow whaling anymore. There is the killing of dolphins going on in some places. With regard to, but now we're seeing much more problems with things like global warming, as you say, entanglement and fishing gear, most of which is plastic, by the way, these days, is a major problem for whales and dolphins. About 300,000 a year are estimated to be killed in entanglement alone in plastic nets. We've just produced a report on this issue of plastics, which includes plastic nets and plastic fishing lines, but also microplastics and the general pollution. We're seeing a lot of whales wash up dead on shore with their stomachs full of plastic. So plastic is ubiquitous. It's found everywhere in the oceans of the world. They found a plastic bottle at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest place in the ocean, much deeper than Mount Everest is tall. So plastics are a terrible problem, as is the entanglement in fishing gear. And then, as we say, global warming, we're having problems, of course, with salmon, which feed most of the endangered orcas in the Pacific Northwest. But because of drought and things, it's getting harder and harder for the salmon populations there, which have already been decimated by the dams that have been put on the various rivers there that they spawn in. We're seeing problems with the gray whales that we suspect may be connected with global warming. We're seeing them washed up dead. Ship strikes are a major issue in the United States. There is some good progress going forward in some areas to slow the ships down so that they don't encounter and kill whales that are sleeping at the surface or not aware that these huge boats are roaring down on them from before. So there's a little progress there. We really need speed lanes. We really need ways to turn the traffic around from places where the whales are found, where we can, and in other places slow down their speeds wherever we can. Right now, there are speed limits in off San Francisco, but they're voluntary, and a lot of the companies don't obey those voluntary limits. We'd like to see them mandatory. So a variety of problems that we're showing up: pollution, plastics, global warming, that are threatening whales and dolphins all around the world. And those are things that we're working on actively, as are a number of other people, and something that needs to be taken into account. Thanks a lot for your work, by the way. Those who don't know, the fine work that the seaweed rebellion has been going on under your work is fine. Great.
Thank you, Mark. Danny Zaki?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That was a really great presentation. I'm wondering, so like a lot of the work that I've been doing lately has been revolving around the algal bloom that we're seeing here in the Bay. And I'm wondering how that might or might not impact whales. And, you know, we're seeing a huge fish die off right now, and how that might be an indirect impact. And if you could kind of speak to that.
Yes, we've seen that, especially in Florida. There have been several instances of those kinds of algal blooms and killing dolphins that swim through them. They are quite toxic, some of the algae species that are involved in these blooms, as well as depleting the oxygen, which harms the fish, and the fish can become contaminated, and the dolphins pick them up and die. So yes, it is a great deal of concern for marine mammals in those areas, seals and sea lions in particular, as well as dolphins that feed upon the fish and go into these more shallow areas.
Thank you. And Paul Kilkenny?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just, in the city of Richmond, we've had in the last 18 months, two dead whales wash ashore. One was at Marina Bay at J. Vincent Park, and it was in such a poor condition that it was just left there to, couldn't be towed away farther out to sea, and just had to be disintegrated there. But the other one was at right at the shoreline for a brand new luxury housing development. And I guess there was really outrage about it, and it was able to be buried on site. Not sure how that happened, but it did. It was unusual because I've never heard of that before in our city. And you mentioned about, well, we have a lot of tanker traffic. We have the Chevron refinery, and then all the other refineries in Contra County, and there's tanker traffic coming in and up the Sacramento Delta. But just it was an anomaly, and I'm not sure if it's something or that has been occurring more, or do you have any idea about?
Yeah, the about half the whales that strand along the California coast are ones that have been identified as being hit by vessels. The other half, it's not quite as clear what's going on. Some of them are emaciated, suggesting that they're having trouble getting food. I mentioned the gray whales. They've had a series of big die-offs where we get more than 100 that strand along the California coast and up into Oregon and Washington along the migration route. And we're not totally sure what's going on, but there is some speculation that global warming is messing with the production of the food that the gray whales eat. The gray whales eat amphipods, which are small little bugs about that long. They look like pill bugs that you find in your garden. They look very similar, although they're white, and they're occur by the millions in the mud at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. Now there's various ways that we think global warming may be reducing the productivity of those waters, and not having so many of the amphipods there, which is causing starvation basically for the gray whales. They come down during the migration and they can't make it all the way, or they can't make it back up. It may be that in their weakened condition, they're more susceptible to being hit by boats. So these issues, again, interact with each other. You get problems that occur that have multiple sources of problems that you have to address in order to get some kind of protection for these animals. And it's not unusual to see gray whales that come into the bay, the dead carcasses. What would have happened is it probably got hit outside the Golden Gate and then came in with the tide and fetched up in Richmond. I might add that there's nothing that smells worse in the world than a dead whale. So it can be quite a nuisance to people who live near it, and it's naturally very much a nuisance for the whales themselves.
Thank you, Mark. Pam Stello?
Yeah, thank you. I want to take off from Debbie Baer's question about a museum. This is something that we've thought about, having a memorial to the whales who died at that location, as well as a center, a marine center. And I'm curious if there's sort of a model where there's maybe a whaling museum or center, but also one that inspires youth to engage in the kind of work that you do somewhere in the world that we could look at as a model.
That's a good question. I put together some thoughts a while back on what could go into a museum when we were looking around the Bay Area. This is back in the days of the Whale Center in the 1980s that I helped run, and looking at different models and places for the museum. We had thought about the Richmond Whaling Station. We also thought about Golden Gate National Recreation Area and some of the large warehouses that they have available there. But none of this ever got off the ground, I'm afraid. I should mention that the Maritime Museum has a very nice collection of whaling sorts of things. It's fairly small compared to the other maritime materials that they have, but they do have some interesting stuff. They also have in the Maritime Library a large collection of whaling paraphernalia, written works, mostly from the heyday of whaling, a very large collection that they purchased a few years ago. That's very nice. But going back to something, again, if I would recommend, if we have the funding to do so, getting some kind of an archaeological review of the area, some kind of a survey of the whaling station to see if there are any artifacts there that might be of interest and help, and that either could go to the Maritime Museum or could be used there. Some kind of a visitor center that includes information on Richmond and includes the history of fishing, because there is a very rich history of Italians and other fishing groups going out of Richmond and fishing in San Francisco Bay and offshore, as well as the whaling interest in the whaling station. So and something involving San Francisco Bay and the ecology of San Francisco Bay, combined with the whaling and the fishing industry history, would be, I think, something that would be very exciting to put together for the area, wherever there's available places to build or whatnot. And then you ask about ideas. There are little bits and pieces of ideas that come to mind. There's a guy by the name of General Whale, who was a wonderful artist for whales, put together a large fin whale model, which is now up at the UC Berkeley campus, up in the hills at the science center there that they have. I'm not remembering the name of that right off the top of my head, but there, yes, the Hall of Science, right? And there's some other similar sorts of things around. As I mentioned, there is a collection at the and display at the Maritime Museum in San Francisco. You can take a look at. Having some kind of a hands-on thing, it'd be almost like an exploratorium, I would think, for the bay might be an interesting thing. But there's a lot of different options to go for. I think there might be some money available from various sources to support such a thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, sign me up. I'll help.
Great. The next question is from Claudia Carr.
Hi, I didn't even know I'd raise my hand, but I have been wanting to say something. Thanks very much, Mark, for your wonderful presentation. I work at UC Berkeley faculty and have taught overfishing and marine nightmare situations and conservation stuff for many years. And I've worked with a lot of different marine groups, and I guess I'm really curious. I live in Richmond. I am really excited about some of the possibilities here. One can't help but when you drop into something like Rosie the Riveter, museum, and you see the excitement of school kids who come there, imagining something at Point Molate with, let's face it, the most nightmare things that go on right here, oil in particular, and then the history of fishing and the impact of just those two massive issues on whales, not to mention marine mammals and fish in general, internationally. It just seems such a natural thing for this area. I have no idea if there's a structure there and what would be involved. But from working with younger kids, not just UC Berkeley people, I do believe that the hands-on issue, especially if it could be something, Mark, you probably have thoughts about this, like, the whale museum up in Friday Harbor, which is very much hands-on with sound and involvement. So many school kids go there and so forth. That's far away. I could see something like that down here, which would be a lot more exciting than seeing the photographs at Rosie the Riveter, however wonderful that museum is, which it is, but it could really involve a huge number of school kids in East Bay, the teachers of whom are just hankering for field trips, So I just wonder your thoughts about that, something kind of integrative like that, and sort of using a little bit of that model, but being maybe more explicit about our oil history and oil lanes, fishing fleets. I teach a lot about foreign fishing fleets, the nightmare of that. I think people need to be educated about that. I don't know what your organization does at Earth Island. I've had many years of involvement at Earth Island, but know of your group, and it's very wonderful. I don't know how much you're really engaged in policy work around oil and fishing fleet issues, but I do think that education on that would be great. So I'll sign off here. I'm in a noisy place and hear any comments that you might have. Thank you so much.
Well, I think you're right, that it can be very exciting and that there's all kinds of different aspects that you could look at. Oil has certainly been a major defining issue for Richmond, both good and bad in terms of providing jobs, but also providing some pretty nasty repercussions with regards to the air and the water quality. And at the same time, fishing as well has had its impacts, in some cases, very adverse on various species, including overfishing and problems of that sort. So putting together something like that, again, you want it all to be sort of integrated together and make sense to people. So you want to pick and choose your various things. Although there's plenty of room out there, I think there could be several, sort of different educational setups that could look at different aspects of Point Molate, its history, its environment, and the various aspects that occur there.
Thank you.
And I should add, congratulations to your group. You guys have done a wonderful job of protecting Point Molate. I know there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but you've taken some major steps in recent years that have tamped down the ability for somebody to put a Disneyland out there or some kind of terrible, huge, high-cost housing sprawl. So congratulations. And keep at it.
Thank you on behalf of the group. Let me ask one last question. I think you mentioned that there were 2 different whaling stations in Richmond, which I knew nothing about. Where was the other one?
I don't know. It had closed by the time I got around there, and I really don't know where the other one was. I suspect it was very close to this one, and it'd be an interesting research project. And probably if you could find the location again, an archaeological survey might be of interest in that area.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I have a feeling, I mean, thank you for making yourself so available. And I have a feeling that we've only been able to get a small proportion of everything you know. But I mean, it's really been wonderful to be able to pick your brain. Thank you so much.
Yes, I taught my children everything I know, and they still don't know nothing. So.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to Pam.
Yes, thank you very much. This has been terrific. And I want to thank everybody for the lively chat. We'll be saving that chat. And I'll be moving forward with checking in with our archaeologists. We have archaeologists working on the Ohlone sites at Point Molate, as well as a Chinese shrimp camp. And I'll see if they can connect with someone interested in the whaling station site. And thank you for suggestions for future speakers as well. I'll move forward with that, Jeff. And thank you for the terrific questions. This has been an amazing conversation. And thanks everyone for joining us. And please tune in next week. Next week we have Anders Soto talking about the history of the struggle to save Point Molate. And then the following week we have Shirley Dean speaking about how to create a park. So please join us. And we look forward to seeing you all again. And thank you again, Mark.
You're very welcome. I should end by a little poem a little girl gave us from grade school. Whales are neat, whales are strong. Some people kill them, but they are wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great.
That was great. Thank you.